Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to History Repeating, a history talk show where we discuss crucial history that you should know. Dare we let history repeat itself? I'm your host, Meghan Hughes. Joining me is my co-host, Tim Rapone.
Hello.
And today is our final episode of the show.
You've done a lot.
This is our 10th episode as well, so we've hit 10 episodes. It's a very short time. I believe we started late March.
Early March because we took a break for spring break.
Oh, so we started late February. Yes. That's what it was because it was Black History Month. Yeah, but it was the very end.
We've done the Iraq War. We've done AIDS. We've done Women's History Month. We've done the Civil War. We've done the Civil War.
A lot.
Done the Civil War.
Yes.
And we even did World War One.
So
that's basically everything.
Are you talking about World War I or the Civil War today?
Neither.
You got to give the fans what they want.
It relates to both in a way. It relates to both.
It probably does. I also noticed that you tend to do like centuries old history, whereas I do century old history.
It's not that old. It's old, but it's not as old as it should be.
Pre-20th century.
No, yeah, you're right. Yeah. I've done a lot of 19th century. I try to take it back to the Middle Ages. We never did any ancient history. I feel regretful that we never did much Asian history.
It is Asian American Pacific Islander month this month, but
oops.
Unfortunately, it's so short amount of time.
Unfortunately, Asian history is a big gap in my historical knowledge. I've been very focused on the Western Hemisphere.
It's an enormous continent. You can focus on any part, but China definitely has an extensively recorded history, and I do think China's history is really interesting, and I would like to cover that at some point.
And Korea.
India,
Japan, India's
sure.
History, very good.
India definitely as well. Do you know the first recorded language was Tamil?
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so we've done a lot. Hopefully it's helped you guys, but we still have two more things for you before we go. Meghan Hughes.
Will definitely be, I just want to remind everyone that if you did miss any of our episodes, they are up on YouTube, and so will this episode. It will be going up shortly, probably by the end of this week. But yeah, enough about that. Today we're talking about the Suburban Experiment. And I titled this segment Fighting Suburbanization. I almost titled it The Rise of Urbanization, The Rise of Suburbanization, but it doesn't focus too much on how it actually came to be, but more of the efforts made to kind of mitigate suburban sprawl. But let's talk about it. And this is, again, this is more recent history. This is post-World War II, during like Reconstruction, well, not Reconstruction, but this is when
the big boom, post-war boom,
baby boom. Yeah,
there is a name for that, but I don't know what it was called. I forgot.
So, what is the Suburban Experiment? The Suburban Experiment sort of prevailed in the 1950s, post-World War II, and it was this idea that American cities, mostly housing, would be subject to their own district. There's something called zoning, and this particularly happens in the United States and Canada, where districts or neighborhoods are dedicated to certain purposes. So we have business districts, we have housing districts, we have food, entertainment. Everything is kind of put into its own little box. And I don't have the reason why, aside from the trend of suburban sprawl. So think about the neighbor.
I know a few reasons why.
Why?
After the war, people had a lot of money. I think beforehand you either lived in the city or in a rural area. Things like a sort of middle ground between being urban and rural didn't exist, hence suburban. And I think also it appealed. I mean, it was kind of a marketing mechanic. I think cars were a big one because in the 1920s, suddenly everyone wanted a car. Everyone needed a car. It's you don't need to rely on a train or anything. It's kind of that idea of American self-reliance where you have your own car, you have your own house, own white picket fence, own family. You have your own little area. And that I think that appealed to a lot of Americans coming back from World War II for better and for worse.
Well, I think also there was, when the American dream was sort of marketed, there was a lot of fear factor used in that, oh, well, if you live in a house instead of in a city, you're better protected. You have your own land. You have space to yourself.
Yeah, crime in urban areas.
Yeah.
And
that does factor into what
those,
I'm talking about today is sort of the negative sentiment around cities.
Yes, it's very difficult because you look at some cities. I mean, you look at some pictures of New York City in the 1890s, and it was pretty bad. But of course, how do you distinguish fact from fiction? What was exaggerated versus what was truth? And of course, once you get into all the racist underlyings, and racial tensions that happened in cities that kind of fueled phobia against them, it's a big knot to untangle.
So for thousands of years, across hundreds of cultures, humans have built cities around walking. And you'll notice this if you go
to Europe, anywhere but America.
Yeah.
Anywhere but America.
Like, for example, take Paris. Paris is a very walkable city. You have businesses, and on top of the businesses, you have housing, or you have other businesses, and housing is located nearby. You have designated biking lanes. You have walking areas. You have very narrow roads for cars, and not a whole lot of parking.
Open storefront houses.
It's like if you go to New York City, in New York City, it's not incredibly efficient to own a car and drive everywhere because parking is a nightmare. Traffic is a nightmare.
Because it was made in the 1800s.
Exactly.
1700s.
I feel like New York is one of the very few examples we have of not necessarily walkable cities, but efficient cities, dense cities.
Like Chicago. I don't really know how you define Boston. I feel like parts of Boston reflect that.
So the suburban experiment prioritizes highways, roads, and zoning. Zoning refers to dedicating districts to one specific use. So, like we said, in Europe or Asia or the Middle East or Africa, you have these cities that have multiple uses. You have entertainment, business, food, all on one street, with housing above or nearby, making it incredibly efficient to just walk from where you want to go. In America, the suburban experiment kind of, I guess I would say the suburbs are very unique to North America.
They definitely started in North America.
There's some examples of it.
I'm not sure if they're unique anymore.
Yeah, but it is definitely the prime example. So suburbs are like these big neighborhoods connected only by roads. You have to drive to get there. There are no other options aside from maybe biking. There is no bus stops. You have to. Driving is the prime way. And let's talk a little bit about what the suburban experiment kind of led up to. This isn't necessarily referring directly to the suburban experiment, but this is more about change of infrastructure, like highway development. I'm going to use Tampa as an example, or at least the Tampa Bay area. In an article from the Tampa Bay History Center, they describe some of the original neighborhoods, and these are mostly housing, but also mixed use. They have businesses, especially a lot of family-owned businesses. But there were several neighborhoods in the Tampa Bay area that were kind of completely demolished to prioritize infrastructure to support heavy car use. So car
culture.
Yeah, car culture, which is, I think, a part of suburban culture.
One grew out of the other, kind of like a symbiosis.
So if you've ever been to Hyde Park, Hyde Park actually used to be a community known as Dobyville. And a lot of Tampanians don't really know about it. And I was surprised to learn about it myself. I forget there was a project that was dedicated to preserving its history. And of course, I couldn't find it this time around. But I did get my information from the Tampa Bay History Center. They said, many of these early black communities, including Bealsville, near Plant City, the Dorcas Pond area, near today's Tampa Union Station, Red Quarters and Four Quarters near downtown Tampa, sections of Port Tampa City, and the town of Fort Brooke plus a large community in northwest Hillsborough County near today's Citrus Park, are largely gone from the landscape. Another neighborhood that still exists today, at least in part, is the Dobyville section of West Hyde Park. So as you can see, when car use is prioritized over not just sustainability or connectivity, but rather over land use, it really disconnects us, and it also has these unintended consequences. So there are a lot of problems with the suburban experiment, as well as car-dependent infrastructure. So this was a lot
of land, takes up a lot of energy.
This was primarily in the 1950s when this started popping up, where neighborhoods were being destroyed to promote car use. Do
you know what the other factor was for interstate highway construction?
I'm guessing maybe car companies.
Cold War. Eisenhower's official reasoning for the interstate project was, he said, "I know you're all really scared about nuclear apocalypse, so here's this highway grid I made, and it'll make it easier for you guys to evacuate if a nuke is coming, and also so that if the Russians are invading, we can move tanks and planes around faster." And everyone was like, "Thanks, Eisenhower." What?
And let me tell you, this did not go unnoticed by Europeans. They basically saw, a lot of Europeans saw suburbia and this bizarre sprawl that was all car dependent. You had no other means of transportation, not a lot of public transportation, especially in Floridian cities. We can't build underground subways, and it just didn't make sense when, we could have these fancy brand new highways instead. And also some of the sentiment that was encouraging this was, well, this is the future. Humans used to walk everywhere. Progress. Now we're driving everywhere. That is a sign of progress. But really, they were using that as a means to kind of comfort themselves in this idea that we were making ourselves more connected. In reality, we were separating and isolating ourselves on the map.
It also shows that attitude of the era about luxury versus efficiency or self-sufficiency, self-sustaining. It's not really a sustainable model. It's not efficient for energy use, of course. Global warming wasn't really going to be on the public square for another 20 years, so everyone was like, who cares? We'll all have cars, we'll all drive everywhere, and we'll not worry about everything going into the atmosphere from it.
And this particularly disturbed one individual, Lord. A man by the name of Victor Gruen, a Jewish architect who fled Nazi-occupied Germany in 1938, who moved to the United States and established a architectural firm in Los Angeles, California. He saw this rapid suburbanizing America, and he thought it was absolutely disgusting, and he wanted to do something to fix it. He was very inspired by the architecture and infrastructure of Vienna. He is Austrian. He was from Austria, lived in Germany. He wanted to bring what he described as Vienna-like urbanism to the United States in order to fix the problems of suburbanizing America. He designed a mixed-use district with what is now known... He designed a mixed-use district with what is now known as a shopping mall at the center. But originally this was an experiment to kind of create a smaller city with more efficient transportation and infrastructure. Outside of the shopping mall lied housing, schools, medical centers, offices, and other mixed-use structures. And then on the outside were roads connecting it to other cities. His proof of concept would be the Southdale Center in Edina, Minnesota. And he hired construction company Dayton to build his proof of concept. But for some reason, Dayton decided against it. They were like, we have a better idea. We're just going to build the shopping mall part. And this will encourage people to spend money and have a place where they can buy from all sorts of different stores. But we're not going to add the housing, the offices, the medical center, the schools. We're not going to make it efficient. We're not going to have a primary way to get there, no subways or buses or anything like that. We're going to build an enormous parking lot outside of it, surrounding it. And that's exactly what they did. And they went against Gruen's idea. According to The Guardian, the construction of the shopping center massively raised land values in the surrounding area, so they decided to cash in, flogging their remaining plots to builders of single-family homes. The result has since become an all-too-familiar sight across the U.S., a mall marooned in a sea of car parking, ringed by multi-lane roads and suburban sprawl. It was far from an inclusive vision. By proposing an idealized alternative to downtown, removed from actual downtown, shielded from the elements, only accessible by car and designed solely for shopping, Gruen had created a mechanism to protect white, middle-class homeowners from those unlike themselves. And of course, this was wildly successful, as you can imagine. People loved the concept of a shopping mall. Gruen himself had stated he hated shopping, and he put this at the center not for consumerist ideas, but for efficiency, because if everyone could go to the center and do their shopping and find jobs and work, it would make it a much busier city. It was also what some people describe as a third place. Your first place is home. Your second place is school or work. Your third place is where you spend your time, hang out, and spend money. And people were very excited by this mall, and it started a trend across America. Shopping malls became a very big thing of the 70s and 80s and 90s. 2 years before his death, Gruen was quoted as saying, "I would like to take this opportunity to disclaim paternity once and for all. I refuse to pay alimony to those bastard developments. They destroyed our cities." It can even be argued that due to the rise of shopping malls in the 1960s, the demand for car-driven infrastructure increased. Today, though, the shopping mall is mostly a relic of America's consumerist boom, dying to its preferred and convenient descendant, e-commerce. I rarely see people today go to malls, but I also think that's because I don't know what really caused malls to...
Convenience. It was just convenience.
Yeah.
People stayed at home. They got lazy.
Amazon.
A mall was more convenient than going to downtown, and Amazon was more convenient than going to the mall.
I guess that's his natural
It's a shame, because I do like malls, but
I really do.
I also would have preferred his full vision.
A quick side tangent. University Mall is the closest mall we have to my house, and I don't think I've ever seen a mall more dead than that mall.
It's just like a...
It's
like
abandoned.
A ruin.
It's empty.
I was also going to add here, it just came back to my mind, the very first shopping mall, sort of, was in ancient Rome, kind of very similar to the structure he's describing here, where it was very in like an urban area so that people would kind of walk to it from their homes and then do their shopping there, and it was a multi-level indoor shopping front. And if you look at it, it still exists today, of course, in ruin, but if you look at it,
That's interesting.
It looks just like a modern mall, but in ancient Rome. So if you want to look that up, there's some great photos of it online.
There's a good quote from Bloomberg reporter Emily Badger that I added to my notes because I wanted to read it. It says, "Americans haven't particularly outgrown the consumer impulse that Gruen detected. We still love to flock to dense agglomerations of body shops and Cinnabons and Brookstones.
So true.
But now those places look increasingly like open-air lifestyle centers with condos above or offices next door. Some of these places are just the old mall in a new Main Street disguise. But when you add residences and cut Gruen's mega block into what actually looks like a downtown street grid, that begins to change things." And not to overuse quotes, but there's another one that I really, really love from New Yorker's Malcolm Gladwell. He said, "Victor Gruen invented the shopping mall in order to make America more like Vienna. He ended up making Vienna more like America."
Yeah, the mall with that context, it feels like a half-completed experiment because...
Speaking of half-completed experiments, we move on to our next story of the battle against suburbanization, which I think had, ironically, the same fate as the shopping mall. It was succeeded by Walt Disney, of all people. He saw the problems with suburbanization and highway development, and he was also particularly inspired by his distaste for urban cities. He lived in Los Angeles, and
That's the worst one.
Yeah. Well, actually, both of these men lived in Los Angeles.
That would also inspire me to try to make something better.
He said here, Walt Disney's reasons, though, was that he thought Los Angeles was dirty and crime-ridden.
Okay. Well, interesting.
Which isn't particularly
not the same reasons as the other guy.
My reason for creating a new
ugly.
city. But he attempted to succeed Gruen in the 1960s. He cited Gruen as a source of inspiration, and he developed his own city called the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, also known as Epcot. The city was circular with a convention center in the middle, surrounded by businesses, housing, and green space, which were parks, trees, and unused land. There would still be roads, but cars and trucks would traverse through tunnels underground, so you wouldn't have to, look at them. Yeah,
because they're gross.
Pedestrians would be able to connect via a monorail above ground, which is another thing Disney is famous for. And he originally tested this monorail at Disneyland in California before his Epcot debut. And this is a quote from archdaily.com on Epcot. The architect theorized the cellular metropolis, a suburb divided into smaller community cells encircling an indoor shopping mall nucleus. Apartments and office buildings would surround the bustling hub to create a vital community center. Epcot closely mirrors the cellular metropolis model, with its central commercial district enveloped by high-density structures. Disney proposal also mimics Gruen's covered hubs to support pedestrians by extending the desirable walking range in Florida's wet weather. And Disney had he definitely put a lot of work into this. He produced like a short, I think it was 15 minutes or so. I've seen the short film depicting his plans in great detail. And he had concept art made, he had real plans. He got funding. Another thing is the convention center in the very middle. It would have hotels above and around it. His original plan for his proof of concept would be that the people who lived in these cellular houses would be employees of Disney. They would go to the center and work for Disney. There would also be other businesses there that work with Disney.
He was not unique in that. Those types of company towns actually existed in the 1880s and 1890s in America, so he's just kind of bringing that back with a new Disney flair.
But that almost seems a little dystopian to me.
It was horrible. They were absolutely terrible to live in, and they're a little psychotic to try to bring that back.
Yeah. But unfortunately, the same year that Disney pitched this, in 1966, he died in December. And of course, the Walt Disney team took over, and in their consumerist fashion, they were like, well, let's build this, but not quite. We're going to make it so people have to pay, and it'll be a theme park, essentially. So they made a sister theme park to Walt Disney World in Orlando. I think it's like Lake Magdalene or south of it.
I've never been.
Today, it's still open. There's still elements that are recognizable, like the monorail and the People Mover. The People Mover was also a part of it. They wanted like a smaller public transportation option. And that's just so ironic that both ended in this way. And I suppose such is as like capitalism.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of just the way where that kind of forward thinking doesn't really merge well with the society that's built around creating capital, between creating profit. Eventually, they're going to take the easier, more profitable route because at the end of the day, reorganizing the suburban structure doesn't make as much money.
And other attempts have been made that I didn't include, but I feel like these two anecdotes stand out just because of their unfortunate demise, or I would say pivot, the way they were twisted. And my last little tidbit I leave you with is, while other cities around the world prioritize walkability, sustainability, public transportation, and quality of life, much of America remains part of the suburban experiment with no plans to change anytime soon.
I was going to comment on that. It's kind of sad, even if they were flawed, to see in the 50s and 60s people at least trying to think of ways to change. They had,
and this was much before this was during the rise of suburban sprawl. This was not,
Yeah.
where we are today.
Because they could remember a world before it. We
exactly.
Can't. What was the Disney one? Something for tomorrow, a new world for tomorrow, or something. That kind of attitude of like looking towards the future and trying to create a better
community of tomorrow.
No one does that. You don't see anyone trying to fix or like just not even if it's bad, just try to like improve it.
I mean,
we are what we are now in America, and people are.
I'll keep my opinions to myself, especially regarding certain politicians. But the Hyperloop in California that was.
I guess that
was pitched, but it never got made. That was over 10 years ago, and it was supposed to connect communities in California, as well as make public transportation a lot more accessible and affordable and quicker. But again, we never saw that come to fruition.
And we're never getting that train line between Tampa and Orlando.
Oh my God. That was another thing. I had an opportunity to take the Bright Line, but I missed it. I took a bus instead, but I am really interested in that, and I would love to see Florida become a lot more connected by train because
well, you know who is to blame for that? Slaveholders in the Confederate States of America.
We have talked about that on that show.
We always bring it back to the Civil War.
Before we go to our next topic, I would like to thank my sources and credit them. I use the articles America's Suburban Experiment by strongtowns.org, the Tampa Bay History Center.org, The Guardian, Bloomberg, archdaily.com, and my major source was a wonderful video essay by YouTuber Flurf Design called The Disneyfication of American Cities. And that's a fairly short video. It's about 13 minutes long, but he also talks about how European and Asian and African cities have sort of been commercialized here in the U.S., like Disney World and Main Street. It's kind of been turned into this commercial idea that walkable cities are something you have to pay for, and you have to drive to them and park and then visit and spend money. And it's a really good video, and he talks about the term Disneyfication and a little bit about the history behind that. So those are my sources. Definitely go check that video out if this was an interesting topic for you. But now we switch gears. Total gears. Another random, completely different topic.
That seems to be the thing we do most often here, but not anymore because this is our last episode.
That is so tragic.
You want to get right into it?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about, it was hard thinking of a last topic for the show, and I figured one that was really important that I'd like to talk about is the Scramble for Africa in the late 1800s. Everyone knows colonization in America. We live it every day. We are living proof of it. Colonization in Africa is not quite as talked about as well, and it's kind of wholly unique.
It's a lot. I would say, well, South Africa is, I think, the prime example of colonization.
But all of it is still today a relic of what it was. Because, I mean, you think of the colonization of the Americas, that took hundreds of years. It was a slow process. I mean, it was a very, very quick in many ways, but still very slow. Colonization of Africa, we're talking about a 20, 30-year period in time. Colonization of inland colonization of Africa did not begin until the 1860s and 70s, and even then, not really till the 1880s. Africa was not colonized. It was colonized, like they had Europeans set up coastal colonies since going back to the late Middle Ages. Of course, the Dutch East India Company had posts all over the outer rim of Africa, but no one was able to go inside of Africa because of mostly malaria. It was incredibly dangerous. There was lots of diseases that Europeans had absolutely no immunity to, a bit of their taste of their own medicine in the Americas. And also because logistically, it's huge. Getting inside there was simply just not possible or profitable or feasible to most Europeans. It was just, I mean, you're talking about moving tons and tons of equipment and men and material through dense jungle with mosquitoes trying to kill you at every turn. And who could forget, lions and tigers too? They're over there as well.
I mean, if I was colonizing Africa, even if I didn't see a lion or a tiger, if I saw a giraffe for the first time, or like a hippo,
That's crazy.
or something like that, I would be mortified.
If you want to laugh, go back and look at medieval drawings of African animals like giraffes and elephants and hippos. They never saw
That's
one,
so bizarre.
it's like they're describing what they heard from someone who heard something from someone.
I also want to add a
Looks
little.
nothing like an elephant.
I also want to add a little fun fact about malaria. And this is another reason why. So malaria obviously was incredibly deadly for European settlers. But if you're wondering, like, how did a lot of native Africans survive malaria? They actually developed an immune response to it that has since evolved into what is now known as sickle cell anemia, which is known as one of the most painful conditions you can possibly have.
That is a strange quirk of evolution.
Exactly.
And anyways, Africa. That changes in the late 1860s, 1870s because modern medicine is now becoming a thing, and people actually have developed a few treatments towards malaria that made it more survivable. And more importantly than that, the second industrial revolution is in full swing, and now we have wonderful inventions like railroads, steamships, and also machine guns.
Oh.
So yeah, that meant that they could now lay railroad tracks to make it more easy to get into the interior. They could survive in the interior. They could use ships, navigate those jungle rivers, and they could also violently subjugate indigenous Africans with horrific new machinery. One statistics from History Is Now magazine shows that at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898, British forces used Maxim guns to kill roughly 11,000 Mahdist warriors while losing only 47 of their own. So that can show you where we're standing here in the late 1890s. But even all of that aside was not the big reason why they were going to Africa. The big reason why they were going to Africa is because Europe was in a depression. And the European markets were kind of saturated. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and capitalism had kind of filled it out sufficiently in Europe, which meant that capitalism needs more capital, needs more input, needs more resources and materials, and needed new markets. And Africa took the bite. They set their sights on Africa. This is a quote from historiesnowmagazine.com, a rather long one. The economic logic was straightforward. Industrial economies in Britain, France, Germany, and Belgium required steady supplies of inputs to sustain production. African rubber fed the tire industry, palm oil was used in soaps and lubricants, cotton supplied textile mills, and gold and diamonds enriched European treasuries. Beyond raw materials, Africa also represented a potential consumer base. Even though most Africans had limited purchasing power, imperialists imagined vast markets where European goods could be sold. This vision of Africa as both a warehouse of resources and a marketplace for manufactured products was central to the imperial project. The discovery of the Witwatersrand Gold Reef in 1886 transformed South Africa into a focal point of global finance, drawing in billions in European capital and cementing the economic priority of the region, end quote. And that's the big thing I'd like to highlight with the colonization of Africa. We're not looking at hundreds and thousands of settlers moving into Africa from Europe like we were in the colonization of the Americas. You know, we're thinking of Central America and Brazil, and of course in North America, what will become the United States of America. Those were thousands and thousands of families just picking up their bags, going across the ocean, and setting up a new life for themselves in the Americas. That was not happening for the most part in Africa. This is purely for corporate control, for enriching the governments and the crown.
That's kind of, well, not kind of, it's incredibly disturbing to think that a lot of European countries had dedicated colonies. And I feel like colonization is such a term that is kind of thrown around lightly, and not lightly in the sense that it can be labeled for anything, but in the sense that people don't really think of a completely negative connotation around it. Like, it's this idea that it happened, so we might as well accept it. But Europe
it is exploitation at its source.
Europe had multiple colonies for multiple different purposes around the world. Mm. I mean, like, Australia is where they sent their prisoners. Africa is where they got their resources, and the Americas is where they decided to send people to start new lives.
Yeah, and this was a different phase of colonization. And this was called neo-imperialism, I believe. It was a new wave of it, and it caused a mad dash for land, which we'll get to. There were some societal reasons as well. I mentioned this in our World War I episode. Germany and Italy were recently unified new empires, And they believe, just like everyone believes they need a car, they believe they needed colonies for prestige, power, and legitimacy. They were new to the scene of the world stage, and they wanted to be taken seriously, and they wanted more money. And to do that, they said, we want a nice, fancy new colony, like someone would want a nice, fancy new Ferrari. France was greatly weakened after the Franco-Prussian War. They'd also lost most of their American colonies at that point. They lost most of them in the 1700s to Britain. And they wanted to revive their honor by getting more colonies in Africa. And Britain, they just wanted more. They already had most of the world, but they wanted even more of it. And of course, there's also Belgium wanted their hat in the ring, which we'll get to that. On the ground level, for selling this to the people, to not the people that aren't running the companies, aren't really making most of the money off this, the idea of the white man's burden, which is the name of a poem by Rudyard Kipling, became very popular with European citizens and people alike. They believed that it was their duty to civilize and Christianize the quote-unquote barbaric Africa. Of course, this is completely unfair to the people and the nations that already existed in Africa, and really it was a thin veil for what was really just plunder. It was pure exploitation.
We saw that with the colonization of North America as well.
But this is almost on a more blatant scale, I would say, because, I mean, when the colonization of the Americans happened when mercantilism was still a big thing, and it was done by crown, and there was also people going there just making a life for themselves. It was horrible, in many ways worse in its own way. But I think the African colonization is unique in that it started when capitalism was in full swing by all major countries during the Industrial Revolution. And so it takes on a more cold and detached and more outright greedy feel to it. Because again, people aren't going to live there.
I guess that's true. They've already seen the colonization of the United States.
Yes.
And despite this, they continue forth colonizing Africa.
And slavery was already illegal, but that didn't stop them from giving them unlivable wages and treating them in ways that we'll get to in a minute. But because of this white man's burden ideal, a lot of missionaries were sent over to Christianize African people, and they believed they had noble ideals for that. That's technically not for profit, but these missionaries still had a very cruel role, even if they didn't intend to it in the colonization, because they kind of paved the way for colonial administrators to come in. They taught European values, European languages, European history, and they devalued African traditions. And now here come the corporate businessmen, here come government officials, and they have a population that already speaks English, French, or German, and they already know European values, and they're ready to take over. Anyways, so this causes a mad dash for land in order to prevent, because we kind of talked about in our World War I episode that there was a delicate balance of power going on in Europe at the time. 14 representatives from 14 different countries came together in the Berlin Conference in 1884 to calmly divide up Africa, it's very disturbing to look back on it, because of course in this conference was widely publicized to give a kind of the cover of order and legality, to make it look calm, like, hey, look, we're all getting together, we're all doing it nicely, but they're doing it nicely for the benefit of white Europeans. No one was at the conference talking about the treatment of Africans, of their rights or anything. It was purely just for the crowns, for the governments, and for the businessmen, and how they could best make money, which waters were international, which ones were owned by France, by Germany, Germany got like Southwest Africa, France got a lot of Northwest Africa, Britain got a bit of everything because they're Great Britain. And it was not good. And it wasn't easy. They didn't just walk in and take it. In some places they did. In some places Africans realized that they really were in a horrible situation that I really couldn't do much about. But there were lots of instances of resistance, sometimes protesting resistance, but often violent resistance. In the Maji Maji Rebellion, the prophet, who Ngwale, I believe is how it is pronounced, claimed to have found sacred water that turned German bullets to water. Maji Maji warriors would douse themselves in the sacred water, and they would attack German outposts and burn cotton crops, because Germany was pushing cotton as a means that, like, they would come in there and say, you have to grow cotton now because we're telling you to. And the rebellion spread really quickly, it gained thousands of supporters, and became the first inter-ethnic battle against colonial control, eventually getting the support of 20 different ethnic groups.
Wow.
This information comes from blackpast.org, and here's a direct quote from them in terms of German retaliation. On October 21st, 1905, the Germans retaliated with an attack on the camp of the unsuspecting Ngoni people who had recently joined the rebellion. The Germans killed hundreds of men, women, and children. And that's end quote. The Germans also utilized famine as a cover to resist the rebellion. They would burn hundreds of acres of crops of suspected supporters, literally starving families to death, just because they thought they were supporting the rebellion. This is not Hitler's Germany, by the way. That is the Imperial Germany. That is under Kaiser Wilhelm. That is not the other Germany you're thinking of.
And this is pre-World War I, too.
This is pre-World War I, so this is a big buildup. Ethiopia, in a more touching note, maintained its independence. It was one of the few, only Ethiopia and Liberia were not colonized in Africa. Everything else was colonized, almost the entire continent.
Not in a good way.
Ethiopia managed to stay on its own 2 feet because it recognized the threat. It had a very large population in Africa, and it modernized its military. It got modern guns, modern artillery, and it also did a bit of European tactics against them because Europeans would often pit tribes against each other. Ethiopia would kind of play European powers against each other and get them squabbling with each other so they wouldn't focus on Ethiopia.
And I'm sure it was different back then too, in how the land was divided and what countries were established. But there are 54 recognized countries in Africa.
Most of those countries today are still roughly around where the Berlin Conference divided them up. Excuse me.
So that is a lot of land that was colonized.
It is a huge continent that they just took, and again, almost 30 years. That's nothing. Most of it was divided up by like the late 1890s. That's crazy. But Ethiopia effectively defeated the Italian military at the Battle of Adwa, and from that point out, I believe I didn't write the date down. I really should have, but it was in the late 1890s. I believe it was 1898, and after that, Ethiopia was recognized as an independent country, and people mostly stopped trying. Although Italy always remained a little bitter, and when Mussolini came to power in the late 1930s, he invaded Ethiopia, briefly took it over, but ultimately the Ethiopians again beat the Italians back and secured their own independence against the fascist regime.
That's another thing that kind of bewilders me is how many countries were involved in colonizing Africa, because you usually just think of the big three, three colonized. Yeah. But Belgium, of all countries, I didn't know until recently.
Really?
Yeah.
They didn't teach you that?
No. We barely learned about Africa in schools. I think for the most part we learned American history and Roman history, European history, and that was about it.
So, let's talk about kind of, this kind of ties into World War I in a way. We're talking about this on a global scale on the world stage. This mad dash for land caused a lot of issues. You have all these hungry hippos gathering around on Africa and eating it up as quickly as they can. Of course, even with the Berlin Conference, there was going to be a little squabbling. Britain and France almost went to war with each other over a railway between Uganda and Egypt in what was called the Fashoda incident. And more famously, there was a couple of Moroccan crises. France and Spain privately split up Morocco together, and they came to an agreement on how to split it up. But then Germany heard that, and he says, not fair. I want some. I want a piece of it. And so the German emperor, Wilhelm II, that's the same emperor who would be in charge during World War I, he personally visited Tangier on his yacht, and from his yacht, he declared support for Moroccan independence.
They had yachts back then?
Yes. And this is not because he truly wanted Moroccan independence. He supported Moroccan independence because he didn't want France and Spain to have some of it.
I was going to say, wasn't France in Morocco?
Yes. And so this caused a whole kerfluffle. Germany and France and Spain and Britain got involved. They all started arguing, and they ended up still dividing between France and Spain, but they let Germany and other countries have like free trade in there, so Germany would calm down because again, they didn't want Moroccan independence. They just didn't want France and Spain to have them. And out of this, well, not sort of out of this, but around this time, the Entente Cordial was signed between Britain and France. This was to calmly divide up North Africa between Britain and France. So it was kind of a treaty between the two countries, and this brought them together. And for those that know World War I history, the Entente is the name of the alliance that would end up fighting Germany and the Central Powers in World War I. And yes, that alliance between Britain and France purely came from colonization of Africa. That's what brought them together. Germany and Britain, I don't want to say came close, but Britain was closer to aligning itself with Germany than people realize. It's not really like that unimaginable to imagine a world where during World War I, Britain was actually on the side of Germany. There were a lot of people in England that wanted...
It's also another war that had no purpose, no significant meaning. So no matter whose side anybody took, it didn't really matter.
Yes, and so ironically, because, Britain and France, they hated each other going back hundreds of years. It was people really didn't know if England and France could ever get along, and so they only came together because at first they just wanted to calmly divide up North Africa for themselves. But then, when they saw how Kaiser Wilhelm acted during the Moroccan crisis, they decided, okay, Germany's getting a little too big for its britches here, and that's what made England and France want to come together because of Germany's actions in the Scramble of Africa. Exactly, because Britain was so hungry for African land and resources.
It's crazy that almost all politics at the time were, who do we hate more? And we'll team up with the guy we hate less.
That is quite literally, there were other reasons, but that was the initial reason why France and England started to come together.
It's petty. It's like
forming an alliance.
Playground squabble.
It kind of was. Now, going on the ground level of things, there were wars fought for this. Most famously were the Boer Wars there's a couple of those fought in the 1890s, and they weren't really resolved till like 1902. Boers were not Africans. Boers were an old Dutch colony. Old Dutch colony. I'm talking like early 1800s, 1700s, living on the coast near South Africa. And they kind of resisted being absorbed into Britain's empire at that point. They wanted to remain self-sufficient. They were kind of like self-sufficient farmers. They didn't really like getting absorbed into this capitalist regime.
That's crazy, too, that the Netherlands had a hand
in
this.
They were old heads there. So they started fighting a guerrilla warfare, a very successful guerrilla warfare against Britain in the usurpation. And for a little bit, they were successful. But then things got a little more heated. And there's a second Boer War where they ended up losing. But during those wars, Britain started using concentration camps where they rounded up thousands and thousands of Boers. And again, these are not Africans. These are Dutch people. And shoved them into concentration camps, men, women, and children. And on top of that, they also shoved indigenous Africans in there.
It proved that it doesn't matter if you're white. It matters.
What matters is that they're making money or not.
Yeah.
But of course, race did play a big issue in this as well.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
So in total, 28,000 Boers died in British concentration camps, and 20,000 indigenous Africans died in these concentration camps.
You're wondering why this wasn't taught in schools.
If you want to disturb yourself, you can look up these concentration camps. You can find photos of them, and you can find children dying in these. You can see it looks like...
There's real photographs?
Oh, yeah.
How recent?
It looks like Holocaust. It looks like images from Auschwitz. It sounds like
the Holocaust.
And I don't know how inspired Hitler was by these concentration camps, but I believe...
he was inspired by the United States colonization.
He was inspired by colonization in general, so yeah. I definitely believe Hitler was... I should really fact-check myself on that. I meant to, but I didn't get around to it. So, yeah, that's a big one. Even bigger than that, we're not letting Germany off the hook that easily, because even more horrific in a way was how Germany treated Southwest Africa. There were awful draconian rules set in place there. If a white person was killed in German Southwest Africa, multiple Africans were killed as a show of force. And of course, if an African was killed by a white person, they were kind of let off the hook. Even though nominally, slavery was illegal, technically they had the idea of the white man's burden where, we're just making them on the same equal footing as us. They didn't see them on equal footing. They didn't ever see them being on equal footing. They still thought of Africans as less than human.
Law is much different than social practice.
They would absolutely ruthless control of them. In 1904, a bunch of Herero and Nama Africans revolted against German rule in Southwest Africa, and Germany responded in full force. German soldiers, is a direct quote from, I believe it is blackpast.org. German soldiers herded the Herero and Nama into concentration camps. Many were starved, hung, shot, flogged, or worked to death as slave laborers. Commander Lothar von Trotha said, "Every Herero, with or without rifles, with or without cattle, will be shot." The Herero went from about 80,000 people to 16,000, and the Nama went from 20,000 to 10,000 people. This policy lasted from 1904 to 1908. That is a huge crime that you hear nothing about, and mostly because it happened in Africa.
And like I said, I personally was not taught African history in not just high school, but not just middle school or elementary school, but not even in high school and I taught this.
These concentration camps.
And I took world history. World history was solely about World War I and World War II, and that was about it.
These concentration camps were the groundwork for, they were. Concentration camps were not a new concept. This is where Hitler is getting his inspiration from Britain and from Germany. And then, of course, the worst offender of all was little Belgium. Because, and this is, I hate to overuse quotes, like you said earlier. I hate to overuse quotes, but these, I couldn't say it better. This is from amdigital.co.uk. Oh, excuse me. This is from ebsco.com. In 1876, Belgium's King Leopold II, one of the least influential monarchs in Europe, sought to expand his holdings by staking a claim to the Congo River basin in Central Africa. Leopold hired renowned African explorer Henry Morton Stanley to chart the region, forge territories with the inhabitants, and acquire as much land as possible. In 1880, the French became aware of Leopold's plans and sent in expeditions to claim their own territory. Quick note, 1880, that's before the Berlin Conference, so this is part of the reason why they ended up having the Berlin Conference. Anyways, back to the quote. Portugal responded by negotiating with the ruler of the Kingdom of Congo to acquire more land on Africa's western coast. Initially, both Great Britain and Germany had little interest in acquiring African colonies, but when they saw their rivals begin the push for territory, they were compelled to stake their own claims. Again, mad dash for land. This quote is from amdigital.co.uk. Before that, I should establish that once King Leopold got personal, it wasn't the government of Belgium that owned the Congo. It was King Leopold himself personally owned the Congo.
That sounds
he set
legal,
rigid rubber quotas on workers. They had to get a quota of rubber or else they would be punished. And this is the quote from amdigital.com. Enforcement of the quotas was through violence and failure to achieve them punishable by death. With the aim of preventing their soldiers from wasting ammunition, the officers of Leopold's Force Public Police ordered that they provide one of the victim's hands for every bullet spent.
Oh my God.
Since the quotas, inflated by the demands of the 1890s rubber boom, were often unachievably high, the basket of human hands was to become a symbol of the nightmare the Congo had become for its people. In a terrible but logical twist, because hands were often easier to gather than rubber, which Congolese conditions could not be tapped but had to be laboriously stripped from vines, there is evidence of whole villages going into battle, the victors presenting the force publique with dozens of the losers' hands in lieu of their own harvest. So because they could not achieve their quotas, they would steal hands and go to battle for other baskets of hands to show the Belgians, hey, we didn't make our quota, so here's the hands we cut off. That's how horrific this was.
It doesn't matter, what the sentiment was at the time back then. How could people not see this and think that this is the most insane? This is, I think, I don't know. That drives me crazy.
It's insane.
That is
I thought most
history.
people knew about that by now. I'm surprised. I guess they don't talk about it as much because I know a lot of people that know about this, but yeah, and
I'm
again,
glad
this
you
is
didn't tell me beforehand because this is my live, genuine reaction that nobody just stopped him.
Very recent history, I should add. You can look this up, and you can find, if you want to go for some heartbreak, you can look this up, and you can find dozens of photos of Africans with cut off hands from Belgium. You can find them posed with proud Belgium colonists showing off their cut off hands, and it is very disturbing. And again, I guess for some fairness, the Congo was brutal even for a lot of European standards. It caused a huge global controversy, and eventually the Belgian Congo was stripped from King Leopold and put under the direct control of the Belgian government. But that's not that much better.
And I feel like it should also be added that the Congo today is going through not much different turmoil. It is almost the same, especially when it comes to mining, what is it, lithium?
I believe so.
I believe that's what it is. They're going through horrible turmoil right now.
A lot of those borders are the same. A lot of the administrations that these governments are set up with are still based off the old colonial administrations.
It doesn't matter how long it's been.
They never went back to their old African customs or setups. Sure, direct colonial rule is over, but a lot of the businesses still have hands in African soil, and a lot of the government institutions that are left are still modeled off of European models. And again, I would like to kind of end off with this quote from HistoryIsNowMagazine.com. While the scramble for Africa had a variety of reasons, it was the economic ones which were primary. It was the need for raw materials, markets, and investment opportunities that propelled the rush of the colonization of Africa. It was plunder. It was stealing. It was extracting resources from Africa, from Africans, and taking it back to Europe and taking the wealth back to Europe.
I think what's frustrating too is that a lot of these European countries, like Belgium and the Netherlands, are marketed as these peaceful,
because Belgium is neutral in
inconsequential
European
countries.
Wars.
Yes. And I want to add personally, because I meant to add some resources at the end of my show, but I didn't have time to gather them. But I do want to add some because Congo, like I said, is going through a lot right now. If you want to be a part in helping that, some great resources to check out are doctorswithoutborders.org. They don't help just Congo, but they help all over the world. A super, super great foundation. CongoStrong.org, friendsofthecongo.org, and CongoChildrenTrust.org. We don't have enough time to talk about it today, but definitely research what is happening in Congo
also,
right now.
I am talking about an impossibly large topic in about 30 minutes. There is so much more. There are so many more wars and conflicts. There's so much
we wanted to cover in the duration of our show, but we're graduating.
We are. And just one quick note on my sources, blackpast.org, amdigital.co.uk, historiesnowmagazine.com, and of course, Britannica, who probably deserves a source on every single one of these episodes we have done. So yeah, that's our show. That's history repeating. And
honestly, I wouldn't be against continuing this in our own free time.
I wouldn't either, but probably less frequently because it is a lot.
Maybe as a podcast format, not live broadcast. But
we don't have the material for a live broadcast.
But we absolutely enjoyed doing this show, and I would honestly say this was my favorite show.
This was my favorite show too. Most stressful because it required the most effort, but.
Let me tell you, though, Tim would put in the work. He would stay up till like 1 a.m. writing this on his notes app.
Maybe midnight.
That's the same
sometimes. A lot of times I was doing it right. I was preparing this right before the show. But, I get to put that history degree and that radio TV degree together in one.
This is going to get you that job.
Show. What job?
Museum.
Okay.
History professor.
That's not happening.
We thank you so much for listening.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being.
We will not be back next week, but you can catch this episode and all of our previous episodes on YouTube at HC Hawk TV. We sincerely hope you enjoyed listening, and we thank you.